Welcome back into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's podcast, the Players podcast, the podcast for the team, the Orange and Black, the Philadelphia Flyers, a team that up until about 2 days ago was in absolute disarray. I'm Russ Joy. You can find me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad, and I'm joined as always by CrossingBroad.com's Flyers beat writer Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. Anthony, like I said, 2 games, 2 positive results here on the road, but I think it's important to probably set some context about just how important this road trip is. Of course, we're going to talk about some of the things that we've done differently, changing the game, I guess, for Flyers coverage from Press Row that I'd like to hit on real quick. And let's get started, I guess. Let's kind of set the context for what this road trip, this 4-game road trip that started against Anaheim and continued to LA and is going to obviously go on to San Jose and Arizona. Let's just kind of set the stage. We talked on the last episode about a little conversation that was had in the bowels of Wells Fargo Center between Ron Hextall and Bobby Clarke. And I think you could probably give the people a little bit of an idea and connecting some of the dots and stuff that you reported that you went on 97.5 in the immediate aftermath of the last home game against the Islanders. Let's just kind of set the stage for how important this road trip is.
Yeah, I mean, I think this road trip is very important, and I think that there's been a lot of internal discussion about where the Flyers were heading into this road trip after that 6-1 loss. Actually, I think it was even before the 6-1 loss to the Islanders. I think that there was some concern, and then that so the Bobby Clarke meeting with Hextall actually occurred the Tuesday before, which was the Colorado game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And so Bob Clarke actually spent the entire game in the GM's box with Hextall, and that's not unusual. Whenever Bob's in town, he still sits up there, so it's not unusual to have Bob there with Ron. But they were very in detailed conversation for much of the game. Which ended up being a Flyers loss. And then afterward, we saw them down, like you had mentioned, in the bowels of the Wells Fargo Center, and they were talking. And as Bob was leaving, walking out to where his car was, he did say to Hexy he'll see him in a couple weeks, which again is not much of anything in and of itself. But then you go to Saturday, and Saturday you have Dave Scott, who's the CEO for Comcast, and you have him at the game in the GM's box. That's not something that's regular. That's not something that you see pretty frequently. And there has been a lot of talk that Dave Scott is not really a hands-on kind of CEO, and the fact that he's there tells you that they're probably seeing some things that have them a little concerned. And my guess is it's something bottom line related. At which point then he's in there talking to Hextall. So then I talked to a couple of people who do the whispering around the franchise, and they had said that things have been pretty tense of late that week with the team. And there was a real sense that they had this trip to figure it out. And that if they came back from this trip and things weren't better, then there could be changes made. Now, what those changes would be, we don't know. There was a little bit of speculation that it could be the coach. There's some speculation it could be the coach and the general manager. There was speculation that it could be a big trade. What that specifically would be is hard to determine at this point. But it was certainly something that has been finally, for the first time, I think, in Hextall's tenure as general manager, finally there is some doubt creeping into the mind that there's something here is not working. So those discussions were kind of taking place. And then, of course, they get their asses handed to them by a bad Islanders team. The fans are chanting, fire Hextall. There's a lot of empty seats. Now, those seats are sold. Most of those seats are sold. But the problem is what you're having here is you're having people either who have the seats and just don't feel like coming because the Flyers aren't interesting, or you have companies who own those seats and can't give them away to their employees or clients, or you have ticket brokers who have bought the seats in bulk and can't sell them on the secondary market. So any way you slice it, seeing the empty seats, even if those tickets are sold, it has got to be concerning for the team because it's there's not a lot of revenue that's being made by those people because they're not coming in, they're not paying to park, they're not coming in and buying concessions or going to the store and buying jerseys or t-shirts or hats or whatever. So there's a lot of things that concerns you, and so when you see those empty seats, and Russ, you're down there with me, you see how many there are. I think that's
20% is probably a nice number.
Yeah, that's probably somewhere probably between 10 and 20%. It's very likely that that's what's causing the concern here, and so I think that that's kind of why we came into this 4-game road trip out west, and the idea is they have to fix it or else. And I don't necessarily know if 2 wins, albeit 2 good wins, they played well in these 2 games against Anaheim and LA, are enough. Like if they get smacked around by San Jose again on Saturday night, and if they lose the game in Arizona on Monday, I wonder if that's going 2-2 on this trip is enough to keep this to stay with the status quo.
And I think that's part of this. It's part of the struggle for this team. I think it's pretty safe to say, like, the biggest issue is if you're anti-Hackstall, the 2 wins are great, right? Like, it's nice to see a good result, and I say "see" in quotes because I don't really know how many fans want to stay up to watch what has been a mediocre at best Flyers club, play at 10 o'clock at night. Do you really want to stay up until past midnight to catch these games? I'm not so sure. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the fan base isn't up. Obviously, kids are not going to be up until midnight, and working adults, like I think for the most part, probably are going to catch the highlights. By the way, I did find there is a site that if you don't like to, have the score spoiled for you, if you just Google spoiler-free NHL highlights, it'll lead you to the video, and you can actually watch it. It's like an 8-minute highlight reel of every game, and it's actually kind of nice. So I've done that. Had to do it last night. I didn't get to stay up and watch the game, but I digress. There's this strange thing that I think is kind of going on with Flyers fans right now, where, like, obviously you want to see the team get results. They get 2 wins. LA, not the worst team in the world, right? Anaheim, not a total mess. In terms of goals per game, they are. I think they're 3rd worst in the league at like 2.36 goals per game. But it's still hard to go out on the West Coast and pick up 2 wins, which is great. But if you're an anti-Dave Hackstall guy, like if you're somebody who screams from the rooftops that this team would be a cup contender if it weren't for Dave Hackstall holding it back, then like this is not what you want to see. I mean, I think, right? So it's this conundrum. If you're anti-Hackstall, these results are keeping him in place. And this is a thing that I've gone back and forth with a few friends, a few coworkers. It's just, what do you want? If the team had gone 0-4, I think it's probably safe to say that Hackstall probably, faces the guillotine, right? And that, I think, gets into a more interesting thing of, does Hextall actually drop the blade on him, or does Hextall put himself on the block right next to him and say, I'm going down with this ship? I don't know. I think that actually is one of the more interesting storylines that can come out of whatever happens to Hackstall, regardless of how this trip goes. But you want to see your team win. It's nice to see some wins get picked up. It's kind of something like what you had asked Hackstall after the Islanders game, when you said, like last year they went on the road, they got things straightened out, and it really kind of seemed to reset their season. It looks like obviously the early results are in. They've been successful on the road in this trip. They've generated a ton of pressure from the slot and even in the crease in these last 2 games. They're playing stylistically a lot different. They're getting a lot of shots through in those high chance and high danger areas. It's like, is this all Dave Hackstall changing the game plan? Is it things are just clicking better for this team? Is it the relief of not having to perform up to what the Philadelphia standard is at home? Is it really just going on the road and bonding as a team? Like, I don't know if we're going to really get these answers right now. I don't know if they'll give us these answers when they come home, but like something has definitely changed. It's not the same team as we saw get shellacked by a woeful Islanders squad.
Yeah, well, let me say this, because I like you, have a hard time staying awake for 10:30 start times on the West Coast, especially when 6 o'clock comes early in the morning the next day. So what I've been doing is I've been trying to stay up and watch as much as I can, and then kind of, go back through the DVR and on 2 times speed and try and catch, the important parts of what I missed at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's kind of been, the way I go about it. And then rather than offer a game recap or a takeaways from each individual game, because now I'm not writing after the game. I have the next day has come around, right? I instead waited for both games to pass and then wrote a very early morning kind of, look at the team at where it is at this point, and said, yeah, these are 2 good wins. There's no doubt about it. When you have so much self doubt in you, and as a team, and it's a fragile locker room. Like, it's good to get 2 wins. It's the first time they won back-to-back games all season, so that's definitely a positive. However, although Anaheim and the Kings are usually formidable opponents, and to some extent they still could be, the Ducks had lost 5 in a row prior to the game against the Flyers the other night. And so that's one thing that was a little bit of an issue for them. Their defense is pretty poor. They don't protect the front of the net very well, and I think you wrote a story addressing that. And then the LA Kings should be a much better team than their record shows. That's why their coach John Stevens is on the chopping block potentially.
Oh, Johnny boy.
For them. And so I thought that the Flyers played a decent game against them as well. And it was a close game until late. Drew got the late goal to put them up 4-2, and then Robert Hay gets them scattered 5-2. So it looks a lot more of a disparate score than it really was. It was a 1-goal game much of the way. Those are good wins, but those are flawed teams right now. That's not to say that they're going to remain flawed, but at the time the Flyers got them, they were flawed. So a real good measuring stick is going to be the game against Saturday against San Jose, because what ends up happening there is you're now going to face a really good team, and we'll see if the Flyers have in fact tightened it up so that they're not making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Or were they just fortunate enough to not have so many things that usually go wrong in their games come back against them?
Yeah, I mean, I think revenge has to be on their mind, right? An 8-2 shellacking in your home opener is certainly going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. I kind of want to maybe hone in on this a little bit about the style change. The Flyers, when you look at their heat map, if you look at the unblocked shots, so I guess let's call it Fenwick. When you look at their heat maps over the last 4 games, they let me reset this. So many times I feel like when advanced stats are cited in articles and in posts, it ends up becoming this drudging thing where it feels like you need to pop 2 Advil before you read an article, right? And sometimes I think people lean so much on the advanced stats, they're just not doing any of the eye test. Like you and I have talked about that plenty. There is a way to use advanced stats, I think, in a game that ends up being really close, or in a loss. You can kind of get a better idea of if a team was just unlucky and they were they were generating legitimate chances and high percentage or high danger chances in a game. When you look at the last 4 games for the Flyers, their Corsi 4 and their Fenwick 4 percentage have been better. And actually, I think it was the Anaheim game. They posted the 3rd highest Corsi 4 percentage, higher than they did in their first 7 games. When you look at their heat map of like where they're actually getting these shots that are getting through, they might not go on to net, but like the shots going through, they've been making a marked difference, at least in 5-on-5 play. We've seen them still taking shots from the point, still taking some shots from within the blue line, but especially against the Kings, it wasn't just like a parallel line running with the blue line as had been in previous games. It's them actually kind of making their way to like the top of the circle, right? And so they're getting these better chances, but like it looks like, if nothing else, if you compare their power play heat maps over the last 4 games, there has been this marked decision to get closer to the net and rip shots from closer. And the closer they get into the slot, into these, into the crease and into, high danger zones, the better results they've had. And, it's something that we've talked about before, I think, while we're down at the center. But, like, this is a thing that is just so common in hockey. And for some reason, it feels like the Flyers have just been so out of the loop on like where the high danger chances are coming from. You look at a team like the Bruins a few games ago. The Bruins were taking shots from the point. They're taking shots from all over the ice, right? But their personnel is also, I think, a little bit more skilled at trying to get pucks in from the blue line. This Flyers team, if nothing else, when you have a guy like Wayne Simmons and eventually you get JVR back, these are big bodies to put in front of the net for deflections. These are guys. The team, I think, has enough size, has enough speed that they should be able to get in front of the net and get shots. And I think this is maybe more than anything, the fact that they don't have fans yelling at them shoot literally every time they get the puck in the offensive zone, and they can actually play their game and get a good shot. I think you're starting to see that, and we've definitely seen it over the last 2 games. I think it's the biggest annoyance that I have is listening to Flyers fans at home games screaming shoot when the guy has a 0 angle to get a legitimate shot or a scoring chance. You see that kind of thing happen, and the fans are just yelling shoot. It's like going to a youth soccer game, and like everybody's cheering on little Becky to rip a shot from like the corner flag. She can't kick it farther than 5 yards, but like, darn it, Becky, you shoot the ball on a 0 angle. You have no shot. You're probably going to hit side netting. That's what it feels like every time you go to a home game. So I can see why these guys are probably playing a little bit more carefree. I don't know. I it's kind of what I'm chalking this up to, right? Maybe?
That's it. Blame the fans, right?
What's the easiest thing to do? But like, really? I mean, if you're going out there and playing your game and playing like you might play in practice, and if these high danger chances are in front of the net, if it takes a few extra passes to get a legitimate shot on net, it's fine. But like, you got to think that at some point it plays into your head when you're playing at home, and literally every time the puck is on your stick, fans are just yelling at you to shoot. It has to throw you off your game. I know you're in the zone, but like, it's deafening. If nothing else, when the 70% maybe filled Wells Fargo Center is just in unison yelling shoot, it's gotta play in your head a little bit, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that they might get a little. They might be tuning that out at this point. I mean, you do it maybe the first couple times you're out there. You're not used to it, but when you're used to it, I think it's almost just white noise in a lot of ways for them. Look, the Flyers have had a lot of breakdowns. The Flyers' problem is more that they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, and it comes back at them. And they've had less of those in these last 2 games, and that's a good thing. But if we really want to look at it, the post that I had that was scheduled to go up on Friday really kind of looked at, and I take, you had mentioned the analytics, and I'm not the biggest analytics guy, but I do appreciate analytics to an extent. I think that there is something that you can glean from them if you have a good sample. And I don't always believe that one game is a good enough sample of what's happening in the team. That's why a lot of times you'll see a team that's getting murdered in Corsi, but yet somehow finds a way to win the game. Well, that happens because that's hockey.
Yep.
If you can take what you have over the course of multiple games or seasons or things like that, then you might be able to identify what's going on. And I'll tell you right now that one of the biggest problems the Flyers are facing, with obviously no JVR in the lineup, but Voracek and Simmons are not playing good hockey. And it's weird to say that because Jake Voracek has 13 points in 13 games. And Wayne Simmons leads the team in goals with 7. So, SanFilippo, how can you sit there and say that this is the case? Here's something I'd like to point out using analytics as an example, okay? Jake has been the analytics darling for the Flyers for a long time, right? Primarily because he's a puck driving or a play driving player. He's got the puck on his stick a lot. He creates a lot of offense. When he's on the ice, it's usually spent more time in the offensive zone than the defensive zone. So he's been really good. I mean, he's been a plus 50% Corsi player 5-on-5 every season of his career, except the second season of Columbus when he was just under, I think he was like 49.7 or something. He was just under 50%. But every year of his career, predominantly with the Flyers, he's been really good. In 2013, 2014, he was a career best 55.17. That is a really good number over the course of a full season, 55%. That's usually, your best players are usually in that echelon as far as puck possession players. And just in case people don't know what we're talking about here on the podcast, so Corsi is determined a number of shots attempted by your team versus shots attempted by the opposition against you when you're on the ice. So in this instance, the Flyers have attempted 55% more, have attempted shots 55% of the time while Voracek is on the ice, and the opponents have attempted them 45% of the time while he's on the ice. That's a 10% difference. That's a pretty good margin, okay? All right. So that's how Corsi works. So that was his best in 2013, 2014, all right? Now, he did have one season where he missed some time because of injury, and then there was one lockout shortened season in here. So I just wanted to, in his career. So I just wanted to look at the last 6 seasons, and including this season, and kind of give you this breakdown. All right. So Voracek, when it comes to creating his offense, here's the number of shots attempted per game that the Flyers have taken since 2013-14 with Voracek on the ice. And it's the shots that are being attempted. This is not shots on goal, okay? Because this includes shots that are either blocked or miss the net entirely. 2013-14, when he was at his best, the Flyers averaged 13.99, okay? The next season, 14.4, okay? Then it went back to 13.7, 13.9. Last year, 14.1, the second best season with the Flyers. This year, it's down to 13.54. But even that, even though it's lower than what it usually is, we're talking, the difference of 0.45 shots per game that are being attempted when Voracek's on the ice. So it's not that big of a disparity, right? Now let's look.
It's really, yeah.
Okay, all right. I just want you to go with me on this, and I'm dragging this out just so that we can, so that the people listening can understand where the problem is. Now, if you look
Fenwick next, or what are you going?
No. I'm sticking with the Corsi. I'm sticking with Voracek. Let's look at the shots taken against the Flyers with Voracek on the ice on that same span. So 2013-14, when he was at his best, 11.37 per game shots attempted against the Flyers with Voracek on the ice. And now I want you to take a notice of how this number climbs. The following season, 12.49. The next season, 12.55. The next season, 13.42. The next season, 13.78. This year, 14.62. Okay? Yes, 13 games is a small sample size, but the trend from 2013 to 2018 is not a small sample size, and that should be alarming. Okay? He was once a puck-dominant player, and now he's not. This means what's happening? He's losing more 50-50 puck battles. He's not as tough on the wall as he used to be, not driving the play in the other direction. So although the team is still generating similar shot numbers when he's on the ice, he's really not good defensively. And it's gotten so bad that the team is now giving up an additional 4% of their shots while he's on the ice than they did 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
That's wild.
Yeah, okay, so that's a significant. You want to use analytics and you want to look at it and say where is an issue? Where is there an issue? This is an eroding issue with a specific player. So it doesn't matter when he's look. Jake is as honest as the day is long. When he says, "Don't always look at the score sheet." I might have had 3 points in the game against the Devils, but for the first 39 minutes, I sucked. Right? That's what he told us.
Yep.
This is why he's saying that. Because if you really look at it, he's not playing well. Let's look at Wayne Simmons. He's even worse. He's got 7 goals, leads the team in scoring. His Corsi 4 so far this season is 43.54. There are 262 forwards in the NHL this season who have skated at least 120 minutes. Okay, so roughly at least 10 minutes per game. Some teams have played 12 games. You say, okay, maybe 10 minutes. Okay, whatever. Of those 262 forwards, Wayne Simmons ranks 228th.
Jeez.
Okay? 43.54 at 5-on-5. So now here's a guy who's not playing well 5-on-5, who has now been demoted off of the top power play unit. So what kind of game is Wayne Simmons giving you? Yeah, he's got 7 goals, but outside of those 7 goals, what is he doing? He's not doing a lot. Now, he was never a dominant play driver, but his worst season of his career was last year when he was 47.33%, and he played the entire season injured. Well, now he's supposedly healthy, and he's operating 4 points below that. So when you look at the new third line that the Flyers have trotted out for the last 2 games, where you have Jordan Weal centering Wayne Simmons and Dale Weiss, I'm going to throw it out there to you, Russ, that the Flyers are hiding Wayne Simmons. And they're playing him with Weal and Weiss because Weal is at 57.92 and Weiss is at 50.30. And they've been positive play drivers. So they're hiding Wayne Simmons on a line in hopes that the play will be better with him out there. Similarly, Voracek gets bumped off the top line where he was for a couple games this year, and gets put back to the second line with Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom, who are both positive play drivers. So you really the team recognizes that an issue has been created by 2 of your veteran players who are not playing good hockey.
It's crazy. I mean, those numbers are staggering, and I think that's why, if nothing else, it's important to measure the difference between the traditional counting stats and the advanced metrics, right? And so, it's funny because if hockey were a bigger topic on sports talk radio, I would assume that the argument that would be made is exactly kind of the one that you made with the traditional stats, that Voracek is playing a point per game and Simmons leads the team in goals. There's no nuance to that argument. It's just regular basic counting stats. It would be the equivalent of in baseball saying this guy gets a ton of walks, or this guy hits a lot of home runs. We don't really care about his average. We're focusing solely on his average and not taking in the entire game. You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny. Like, I don't think that a lot of fans right now are well versed in the advanced metrics or what they mean, or using them within context, mixing the eye test versus the stat test, right? But if you I think a lot of people would understand that, baseball, maybe more than any sport, is the ultimate advanced metrics game, right? And so, while years ago, things like batting average were the most important stat to a lot of people, you started taking into account other kinds of advanced batting stats and, different kinds of counting stats give you a better idea of, is a guy just unlucky? Is the or the balls that he's putting in play hard hit? Do we project that, over the course of a season they would get down and the guy's average is misleading? I think baseball has come around. I think the general baseball fan has become more educated in those kind of stats. I think hockey's a little bit behind in it, but the fact that these metrics exist, kind of give you a better idea of how a team is doing, and in the grander scheme of, or in the, the greater context of a season and in, a few game streak here, gives you a better idea of how is the team playing beyond what those traditional counting stats are. So you make an interesting point, and it's probably the perfect example of why traditional stats alone don't do a guy or a team justice, and advanced stats alone don't do a guy or a team justice. You do a nice job of marrying the 2 of them together, and you really do get a holistic view of what exactly is plaguing a team or what's working well for them. So the idea of them hiding Simmons is not entirely surprising. Hearing that the advanced stats are as low as they are, and you made a compelling case for the fact that they're probably hiding him, this kind of comes back to, I think at some point a trade has to go down. Regardless of how this trip goes, if Voracek is somebody that you think you can get legitimate value for on the trade market, I think at some point you might have to consider making that trade. And I know that you mentioned in your piece after the Islanders game that like Voracek is probably the guy first on the list to go. But like he's carrying, what is it, an $8.2 million cap hit this year, and I think for the next 3 years. If you can get some value for him, and I'm not saying like low value, I'm not saying like late round draft picks, I think you can probably get back an asset that can help your team now. If you start playing fundamentally more sound hockey, like maybe it works. But I would ask you, if Voracek is a guy who goes or Simmons is a guy they trade at the deadline because I don't see any way that they decide to re-sign him. If you trade these guys, like, are you going to get much value? And is it really going to do enough for your team that, like, it's worth continuing to build around Claude Giroux as your captain? Is it just putting a Band-Aid on it, or do you really think that at some point this team's mental makeup, the way they handle themselves, the insecurities, the sensitivities that it seems like these guys have, things that Hackstall has alluded to, do we just start to think that, like, fundamentally the team needs to blow up this core?
Well, it's always the hardest decision is to decide when it's time to move on from your franchise player. So I think it's really hard when you say, do you want to keep building around Giroux? Well, the one good thing about it is that Giroux's got some years left. I think he's actually played well. He's not played as well as he played last year, but he's not been bad. He's also averaging basically a point per game. He's a point over. He's 14 points in 13 games. But he's got good analytics metrics. Yeah, he's actually played well. People, and I address this. You hear so many people say "strip the C." It's not. It has nothing to do with the public perception of a good captain. He's well liked in that locker room. He's well respected. He's fine in where he is. So I don't think that this is something that the Flyers are going to want to do. Is break it down that much. I do think that you have guys in Voracek and Simmons, however, who can get you some return. Voracek will get you more return, even with that cap hit. Because there's even the possibility, I mean, the Flyers are not in danger of being close to the cap. I mean, if they needed to, really, in order to get, if they wanted to get better return, if they want to, pay a part of that salary maybe for, a season or two or something to kind of, bolster what they're getting back in return, they could always do that. I don't think that they need to. I think that salary, it might be slightly high, but not overtly so. And I think that you can get something for Jake. Simmons, you're not going to get as much because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. But there might be a team who looks and says, we can improve our power play, get a great leader and character guy on our team for the Stanley Cup push. Let's go get Wayne Simmons. And he would be I think would be an ideal addition to any team. And the Flyers would get a little something for him. But I mean, I don't. When you say something's got to give, I don't disagree, but I don't necessarily think it's 2 weeks from now. I think these 2 wins have kind of maybe held the dogs at bay a little bit. You know what I'm saying, or the Wolves at bay a little bit. Now, if they go out Saturday against San Jose and get swamped and play terrible again in Arizona thereafter, then it could change. It could change everything. But you asked me before the Boston game, the last time we recorded, how I thought the Flyers would do in these 6 games, the 5 games on the road and the home game against the Islanders. And I gave you 2-3-1. So far, they're 2-2.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean,
Yeah.
they're either going to exceed what I suggested with one more win, or if they, maybe they get beat by San Jose. I don't think they're beating the Sharks. I don't care. They want to get revenge, anything. But I don't think they're good enough to beat San Jose. So I don't think they beat the Sharks. And then the Arizona game's the interesting one because I think that's the one that could go either way. And they're right about where you expect. So the real thing, and one of the other things that I addressed, and this is something I also wanted to talk about with you a little bit, Russ, is one of the things I addressed in the the assessment of the team is the coach, because I know everybody calls for his firing, and I was one of the first people last year who suggested, hey, a coaching change might not be a bad idea when you lose 10 games in a row. That's not suggesting that things are good. But I don't think that I don't ever think that Hackstall's an idiot. I know a lot of people do. I don't think he's mind-numbingly stupid. I think he makes some in-game decisions that are kind of questionable. I think that for the first 3 seasons he was a coach, he was a little bit too stubborn with his game plan and didn't address it until it was either too late or much later than he should have addressed it. But But I think that we're seeing him be a little bit more aggressive with changing things up this year. He doesn't like the way things are going, and it's not just the kids who are being penalized or being punished for it. I think that you're seeing the changes that are being made. He split up his top pair defense. He took Voracek and Simmons off the top power play, demoted them. He also demoted Scott Lawton, which a lot of people were questioning. Scott Lawton's Corsi is worse than Wayne Simmons this year. It's, that kind of might be a little bit of a surprise to people. But he's also not been afraid to call out players, not specifically by name, but
Wheel.
You can't take that penalty, or you need to be more competitive, Misha Vorobiev, or
who was then sent down, and Avi Kubel was brought up.
Right, exactly. He's had a better balance in the way that he's identifying specific flaws, but at the same time still being effusive of players who are playing well. So for that, I think you have to believe that he's got a better handle on this maybe than we all thought to begin with, and that he's able to get this team to a point where it's like, okay, we've been backed into the corner, now let's come out swinging. But my concern is that they always do that. That's where I lose the complete faith in the coach, because how do you continually put yourself behind the 8 ball before you're ready to play hockey? And that could be in a specific game, over the course of 4 or 5 games, over the course of a season. How do you continue to put yourself in that position, and then and only then decide that it's time to get it right?
Yeah, and I think that's really the concern that a lot of fans have, and that I think it was what game was it? It was the Islanders game. Afterwards, you and I are getting ready to go on the elevator. I'm like, well, and I think this kind of comes back to something we said off the top of the show, but if you're looking for change, you needed bad results on this trip. And to me, if the idea here is that this team is going to do this reset, they're going to go out and get good results on the West Coast, and it's going to hold off what might end up being the inevitable, or what many people think is going to be the inevitable, which is the firing of Dave Haxtell. At what point is that really the best thing? Like, I think this goes 2 ways. Haxtell's job status continuing to just be kind of pushed off. Like, it's clear that within the organization, there has finally been thought, if there hadn't been before, they were getting very close to pulling the plug on the Haxtell experiment, right? If that's the case, if you're that close to firing the guy, then is it really that good to continue to just kind of push off this inevitable thing? I guess on the flip side of that, is making an in-season coaching change really going to be beneficial to your team? And like, who could it be that you would bring in that you would actually want or think would, implement a system that would be beneficial to your team, not just this year, but going forward? Is there a good candidate on the market? Or are you just going to promote somebody from within? Is it going to be somebody who's currently on Haxtell's staff? Or are you going to go from somebody from the Phantoms? And we talked about this on the last episode. Does Hextall decide to go out and get Daryl Sutter to come in here because they have a connection from the Kings? To me, the only thing to do in that situation is to try to bring in somebody who has some kind of credibility. That would be Sutter. But again, is that going to make your team better this year? And is it a guy who you think long-term has a future here? Because he's not going to come in here to just, right the ship for a year on an interim basis, right? So I'm just kind of in this torn phase where I don't think we're going to see a fundamentally different team the rest of this season. I think that we've seen enough of an adjustment on this road trip so far to say, all right, maybe Haxtell has changed this game plan enough. He's starting to play to the strengths of what the team might be and get away from, what I think has been kind of this strange system of taking so many shots from deep and low percentage shots. And maybe at some point, oh my gosh, my kids are going nuts. They're going absolutely insane.
I can hear them.
Maybe at some point you just kind of hope that, if the coach, if you decide to move on from him, you'll actually see a different style. I think it is commendable to an extent that Haxtell has, seemed to fundamentally change what they're doing in the offensive zone. But then I wonder, why has it taken so long? And if they get some good results, what's it really going to take for him to revert back to this old style that really hasn't found a lot of success over the last year and a half, 2 years? These are the issues that I'm going to struggle with. And maybe they stick to this. Maybe the system continues to work. Maybe they're able to right some of these issues with the PK. But I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point where the ceiling of this team is much higher than it is right now.
Yeah,
And that to me is the problem.
yeah. I mean, you got at some point you got to sit there and say being mediocre is not good enough. Being a fringe playoff team who gets bounced in the first round is not good enough. I mean, that's really just how you have to slice it. Um, I don't know. I just think that it's a you're 6-7 at this point in the season. Okay, um, but boy, it's frustrating, and I understand why. That said, Russ, I don't want to sit here and completely complain about them. They do have some positives that have been starting to shine lately, um, and we'll wrap it up with talking about some of these positives. Um, you look at a couple of guys on offense who are finally getting the opportunity that they deserve. Travis Konechny, Nolan Patrick, Jordan Wheel. These guys are playing good hockey right now. Konechny is really jump started that top line. It made Couturier has started to look healthier, and so now you're starting to see a good top line in Giroux, Couturier, Konechny. But Konechny's also playing top power play minutes now. He's really been much better over the last handful of games. He did have a struggling start to the season, but he's been a lot better. So you got to like that. I think Nolan Patrick has been really good this year in every game that he's played, pretty much. He did miss a couple there with the upper body injury concussion, but he's been excellent. And talk about a guy who goes to the net. He gets to the front of the net. And Jordan Wheel, as long as he stops taking penalties, he is driving the play. He is creating offense. I'd like to see him score a little bit more, but he gets so many chances and creates chances for his line. So you're seeing some good work out of those guys. And then on defense, and I wanted to address this since we got a Twitter question about it. Actually, we got two Twitter questions about it. One from Eric Heflick and one from Jerry Temple, both asking about Travis Sanheim. Like Eric wanted to know, why do you think we're consistently seeing Sanheim sixth among defensemen in ice time by a decent margin when he's generally played well? And Jerry says, at what point do you guys think they start to let the leash out for Sanheim and use him regularly in the top four? And I'm still I think he's had a good season. I think Travis Sanheim's been much better than he was last year, but I still think that he's occasionally prone to getting caught flat-footed or overcommitting to his side of the ice, or not coming off the wall
within his own zone.
Yeah, or not coming off the wall well on his own end. That I think what the Flyers are doing, the reason that he's putting up good metrics, good analytic metrics, good advanced stat metrics, however you want to phrase it, is because they are protecting him, and he and Gudas are not playing against a lot of the top lines.
That's a credit to the coach too. Like, whether or not you like Hextall, like that, there really is a legitimate, thing that he's protecting Sanheim, from not playing against those, the top two lines. And there we go, kids. But really, like, it is a good job by this coach to make sure that he's kind of building up Sanheim's confidence. We talked last year about the fact, and I guess probably the last 2 years, not on this podcast, but just in general, that Hextall tends to, send younger players up to the press box to watch, doesn't really let them work out the kinks like some other coaches might. But the fact that he's putting Sanheim in position to succeed, which is what he's doing by not letting him play against top lines, you're building the kid's confidence up and you're letting him get experience at this level, at this speed. And if there's one place that I think Hextall's done a good job this year, it's with that. Now, not to derail where else you were going with this, but just really quick, like Vorobiev got sent down. And Vorobiev was a guy that I think a lot of people thought was going to sit for maybe like a game, maybe two at most, to make a point and then get inserted back in the lineup, and it just never happened. So, like, maybe some people would say that's malpractice, but I don't think in the case of Vorobiev, he had done enough to solidify his position on this team to go through a bit of a rough stretch Now, granted, the guy played out of his mind in training camp. He jumped over Jordan Wheel. He jumped over other guys on this team, and he should be commended for the effort that he put out. But, like, he simply wasn't getting it done. And so, like, I understand conceptually why Hackstall took him out of the lineup. And then, like, maybe to the GM's credit, sending him down instead of having him sit in the box for 6 or 7 games in a row, like, let him get his legs back underneath him, let him get some actual game action in the AHL, and then if an injury happens or if somebody struggles, if an Abe Kubel struggles, maybe think about bringing Vorobiev back up and, shifting Wheeler or Lawton back out to the wing, and you fit Vorobiev back in as a center. Like, I don't know. I feel like in some ways they've handled a lot of these younger guys better this year than they have in the past. So if I'm going to give the coach credit, it's probably in the way that he's handled some of these guys.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And the thing with Vorobiev is, he's had a bit of a history of being a non-competitive player at times. Not to say all the time, but at times. And I think that even goes back to his days in the AHL, whatever. I think that's kind of been the knock on him. He seemed to have shed that in training camp, and then it came roaring back once you saw that he was overmatched in the NHL. We did have one other question. Final question. This is an easy one, I think, to answer. I'll throw it to you. This comes from Darren Scott on Twitter. In your opinion, is the poor team defense that this team has shown due to a bad defensive unit, or the forwards not helping enough in the defensive zone?
I think it's the latter. Let me just put it like this. I think it's a little bit of both, but I think this is lazy defensive play by the forwards. And to me, I'm a soccer guy, right? So I make a lot of comparisons between hockey and soccer, and I think a lot of the similarities kind of hold true. Your defenseman can only do so much. Your goalie can only do so much. There are 5 guys on the ice for the other team that are out, that are willing and able to get into the offensive zone and to score. And if you only have your 2 defensemen back and your goalie back to help defend the net, you are doing your team a disservice. And so there have been, I don't know how many times that we've been down watching games together where all I keep saying is far post, far post, far post. It's the same thing that happens in soccer on an odd man rush, on a counterattack, on a set piece like a corner kick. If you don't defend your back post, if you have nobody in the general vicinity, there is not a whole lot your goalie can do, and it doesn't matter how good or how skilled your defenders or your defensemen are. You are putting your team at a massive disadvantage out of sheer laziness. And that is the thing that to me is unacceptable, is we've had so many forwards on this team that are not getting back, are not tracking, are not finding a man, are not bodying a man, are not defending. If we're going to go with like a zonal defensive coverage, they are not getting themselves in position to bail their goalie out. And it doesn't matter if it's Brian Elliott, Michael Neuver, if it ends up being Alex Lyon, if it's Cal Pickard, if it someday is Carter Hart, if Stoli the goalie comes up, it doesn't matter who the goalie is. They are not Superman, and they are not twice the size of the net. They are not going to be able to bail out lazy play by the forwards. And that to me is the number one issue defensively with the team.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's more about, and really, it's not just, you're not wrong when you say that they don't come back and help. They don't, but it's also they force their own defensemen to make mistakes on breakouts, because what ends up happening is the forwards get too far because they want to start a rush the other way, and they then force their defensemen to make more difficult passes. And a lot of times the most efficient way to play hockey is the most simple way to play hockey. The simple pass, the simple play, the easy play is the way to go. So, you get closer to your defenseman so that he has an easy pass to give you, so he doesn't have to try and stretch it out into the neutral zone and turn the puck over. And then now all of a sudden you got the other team coming back at you 3-on-2 with speed, and your defensemen are down low, so they really can't come out and challenge. I mean, that's part of the problem. So the forwards, and a lot of times, there are a lot of complaints about this Flyers defense, and sometimes it's rightfully so. But a lot of times it's not the defensemen themselves; it's the team defense, which incorporates the forwards as well.
And I think that comes back to what Scott Lawton said after, I think it was the New York game, where he said we're cheating. It's this team's propensity for cheating on angles, for cheating, waiting at the blue line to try to start that counterattack, kind of to your point, and just not playing fundamentally sound. It's like everybody's out on the ice, especially, and I would say this is more the forwards, but is setting themselves up for a counterattack to try to get a breakaway and to try to get the glory of scoring a goal. And And if that is going to be the mentality of this team, then guys need to be replaced, right? They need to be sat, they need to be pulled, they need to be demoted onto lower lines. And we've seen it happening throughout games. So while some people in this city who have an avenue to put out an opinion about this team will, scream and rant and rave that this coach is a moron. They don't care if he's, going wakeboarding. They don't care about him off the ice, like whatever. If you are so blinded by your hatred of a coach that you can't recognize when he does something well, then I think you're doing the fans a disservice. So there are things that Hackstall has done well. There are things that he seems to be doing better as a coach, as an in-game manager. Is he a great coach? I don't know. I wouldn't say that he's like a top 10 coach in the league. I think that's pretty fair. Some people might not put him in the top 20. I don't have a feeling about it really either way. But I think that this urgency and the kind of duress and distress that the team was feeling, I think it has trickled down from the top. If it was Dave Scott in the GM box, trickling down to Ron Hextall, to special advisors like Paul Holmgren or Bobby Clark, obviously down to this coaching staff. They have made changes, and to me, they're playing a game that, in theory, if they were to keep this game plan and they were able to adjust to what will eventually be adjustments made by opposing teams, if they're able to adjust on the fly like they have, they're able to incorporate young players into positions to be successful, and they're holding vets accountable, not just the young players, then like maybe this team does end up kind of hitting its stride, and maybe they do end up becoming like a 6th seed in the East. And that's not that bad. I don't think it's great. Like, I don't think anybody was coming into the season hoping for, a bottom 2, bottom 3 playoff team in the conference. But like realistically, with the cap space they have this year, which is about, I think, roughly $8 million they have. Next year it goes up, depending on, some offer sheets going out to guys. They have about $30+ million according to Cap Geek available for next year. This to me is like, you're a year away. And I know that Flyers fans are sick of being told they're a year away or 2 years away from being a year away. But like realistically, you've got the cap space available to you next year. You're going to have guys like Wayne Simmons off the team that are taking up some of that space. If you eventually decide to make a Jake Voracek trade and try to bring in a guy who's, maybe at half the salary, you're going to have cap space. You're going to be able to get better. This team will continue to grow. If the coach does a good job the rest of this season or however long he has to, make the best possible use of these young players and vets, then I don't know. Maybe he's not the worst guy to have here. I can't believe I'm saying it. What is happening to me? I'm getting soft on Dave Hackstall as we go. Isn't this is not what people tuned in for.
I know. It's not at all. Not at all. So Russ, we have to I know we're going to be wrapping this up, but we got to tell everybody about our new venture that we are doing down at the Wells Fargo Center, and we're looking for a name for this. Still, we're kind of debating what to call it. The Press Row Show, the show from Press Row. Anyway, I think that it's a fun thing that we're doing where we are going to be streaming live from the press box, pregame and during intermissions. On both Facebook Live and on Periscope through Twitter. And you'll be able to interact with us. We'll answer your questions and read your comments and talk about a bunch of things involving the Flyers really in real time. Pre-game usually about 30 minutes before the game starts.
Yep.
And then intermission within a couple minutes of the final horn at the end of the period. So
I do have to say, though, the only negative about the intermission show has been it has thrown off my schedule a little bit about getting my popcorn, my M&Ms, and my coffee or brisk iced tea. But I will do it because it's what's best for the fans of Philadelphia.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
I will hold off on my high calorie, high fat, high salt intake for the greater good. I have to say, we did get some really good feedback on it, and I think we were very appreciative of the fact that people were tuning in. I would like to hear from people because we often post these shows on Facebook and on Twitter, and of course on the site. Like, I would actually like to know from people what they prefer, which medium they would prefer to watch and take this in on between Facebook and Twitter. We do intend on doing them both. The way that we did the first couple was Facebook. The Facebook Live video was through the Crossing Broad Facebook account. That's my 3-year-old playing piano now. the Facebook account for Crossing Broad, and then the Twitter Periscope feed that we were using was Anthony's Twitter account, which is at AntSanPhilly. So, I'm hoping that people continue to tune in. We saw bigger numbers as the game went on, and that was even after the team fell further and further behind. So, I don't know. I'm hoping that people are going to continue to tune in, obviously tune into this show. Our listener numbers have been growing every episode, which is awesome. That means people are spreading the word about the show. And hopefully, as we continue to try to put out what is the best coverage of this team in a pregame and intermission style show, get involved, tell your friends, tell family, tell whomever to, check us out on Facebook Live and on Periscope, on Twitter. And I don't know. I'm grateful that people were tuning in for it and then, reposting the show. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I think you should use your 3-year-old's musical abilities as the lead-in for our show this week.
That's really not a bad idea. I actually, well, I don't know how I feel about it. He was just over here. I had the mic muted, and he was talking about the Voracek Chia Pet. He was very excited about that. So anyway, he's over trying to play piano, which is awesome. So
that's great. That's great.
Luca, do you want to play the folks out with some music? What do you think? Can you play us a tune? All right, he's getting set. He's getting set with the book. So
okay.
We'll do the closing spiel here, and he can maybe play us a few notes while we're on our way out. So as always, yes, dissonance. Yes, I love the musical dissonance that's happening in the back. Go check out the other shows on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, including Crossed Up, a Phillies podcast with Anthony and Bob, who you can find on Twitter at BW Crossing Broad. I know that you guys are planning on recording a show. We're recording this Friday night, so MLB free agency has started. So that's a thing. So you'll want to check out Crossed Up. Go check out Crossing Broad FC with me and Phil Keidel. He's on Twitter at Phil Keidel. That's Keidel. It's not hard to spell. It's Phil Keidel. It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia with Kevin Kincaid and Dave Zeitlin. Of course, the Union, Anthony's favorite team in the city, they lost in their one and only playoff match this year, their third playoff appearance in franchise history. They lost to NYCFC at a micro-sized Yankee Stadium field, which was awful, as per usual. And Crossing Broadcast, we didn't put out an episode this week, which one of those was Kyle's fault, one was my fault, but I guarantee you the next episode that we do, there are going to be some stories. Kyle spent the night last night with the entourage and the man himself, with Allen Iverson, and I know that he has some stories that he's going to want to tell the fine folks of the Delaware Valley, so go check out those shows as well. Anything else you want to put out there, Anthony, before we go?
No, I'm looking forward to doing Crossed Up with Bob on Sunday night for Monday morning, because we got a lot to do as we get ready for free agency in Major League Baseball. So Phillies are going to be a big off season. So we do have a new episode coming out on Monday morning. Just make sure everybody checks that one out as well.
All right, well, for Anthony, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly, I'm Russ at Joy on Broad. Don't forget, check us out next.
And for Luca, playing music in the background.
And for Luca playing music on the background. He's so excited. He's got sunglasses on now. This is he's gone through every stage of being a Flyers fan. He's now, he's hammered the dissonance. Now we've got a little bit of some musicality going on, which is good. This is kind of like the Flyers. They were in absolute dissonance, hockey dissonance on the ice at home, and now they've managed to work it out. Oh, he's grabbed an accordion now. So, all right, for Anthony, for Luca, I'm Russ, and we'll catch you again next week. Don't forget to check out the pregame and intermission shows live from Press Row. We will talk to you again next week.